Take a look around you. In the offices, the halls of power, the social circles that dictate the world. Have you ever noticed a strange, recurring pattern? Why is it that the people at the very top are often not the most brilliant, the most creative, or the most visionary? Why does society seem to reward the average, the agreeable, the predictable, the middle of the road, while the true outliers, the geniuses, the deep thinkers, are often left to rot in the shadows of isolation? Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, had a brutal explanation for this. He believed that to be a genius is to be a threat to the will of the collective. To the masses, brilliance is not a gift, it is an insult. It's a mirror that reflects their own limitations. Today, we are exploring a concept that defines our modern reality: mediocrity. We will dive into why being average is actually a high-level survival strategy, why society treats profound thought like a contagious disease, and why, if you've ever felt like an outsider, you might just be paying the price for seeing a truth that the world is desperate to ignore. Welcome to Orbit. Let's peel back the curtain on why the world belongs to the ordinary and what happens to the rest of us. To understand why mediocrity is so highly valued, we must first understand what Arthur Schopenhauer saw as the curse of the high intellect. For Schopenhauer, existence wasn't a gift, it was an expression of a blind, irrational will to live, a force that cares only for reproduction and survival, not for truth or beauty. He famously stated that intelligence is invisible to those who have none. But the tragedy goes deeper. In Schopenhauer's worldview, the degree of suffering in a being is exactly proportional to its degree of consciousness. The simpler the creature, the less it suffers. A plant feels no pain. A dog feels some. But a human, especially a brilliant one, feels the weight of the entire universe. Schopenhauer argued that the genius is someone who has been over-endowed with consciousness. While the average person uses their mind only as a tool to satisfy their basic needs, food, status, social approval, the genius possesses a surplus of intellect. This surplus allows them to see the world objectively, as it truly is, stripped of the illusions that keep society functioning. But here lies the conflict. Because the genius sees what others cannot, they become a disturbance to the collective peace. The will of the masses wants comfort, not clarity. It wants a pleasant lie over a devastating truth. When a person of high intellect enters a room, they don't bring light to the mediocre, they bring shadows. They remind the average of the vastness they don't understand, the questions they are too afraid to ask, and the insignificance of their daily preoccupations. Schopenhauer noted that a genius is often solitary, not because they hate people, but because they find no company. To the mediocre mind, the conversation of a genius is like a complex symphony played to someone who can only hear a single drumbeat. There is no resonance. This is the first reason why mediocrity is prized. It is safe. It is understandable. In a world driven by the will, someone who thinks too much is like a broken gear in a machine. The machine doesn't want to be better or wiser, it just wants to keep turning. And so, the collective exerts a subtle, persistent pressure to flatten anything that stands too high. It punishes the genius with isolation, while rewarding the mediocre with the greatest prize the will can offer, the feeling of belonging. But if the genius is an outsider by nature, how does the crowd protect itself from their influence? This brings us to the social mechanism that turns mediocrity into a fortress, a concept later echoed by Nietzsche, the herd morality. If Schopenhauer showed us the internal curse of the genius, Friedrich Nietzsche revealed the external conspiracy of the masses. He called it the herd morality. To understand why society crowns the mediocre, you must understand that the average is not just a statistical middle ground, it is a protective fortress. The crowd, the herd, has one primary goal: survival through stability. Stability requires everyone to speak the same language, value the same goals, and fear the same shadows. Anyone who stands out, whether through extreme intelligence, radical honesty, or creative defiance, is a crack in that fortress. They are a threat to the collective sense of security. Think about the words we use to praise people today. Relatable, down to earth, team player. What do these actually mean? They are coded terms for mediocrity. To be relatable is to ensure you don't make anyone else feel inferior. To be down to earth is to promise you won't fly too high where others can't follow. Society has performed a masterstroke of psychological manipulation. It has turned a lack of excellence into a moral virtue. We have been taught that being average is synonymous with being good or humble, while deifying the self or pursuing a higher solitary truth is labeled as arrogance or elitism. By making mediocrity a moral standard, the herd ensures that the genius is not just ignored, they are shamed. Schopenhauer once remarked that every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world. Now, imagine 1 million people sharing the same limited vision. They create a truth by consensus. When a diha, a genius, appears and points to a horizon far beyond their walls, the herd doesn't feel inspired, they feel attacked. They realize that their entire reality is a small, safe box, and since they cannot expand their minds to reach the genius, they do the only thing they can to restore their comfort. They pull the genius down. They use the power of the ordinary to drown out the voice of the extraordinary. This is the social contract of mediocrity. I will pretend you are special if you promise not to be better than me. But this isn't just about social rejection. In the modern age, this mechanism has been industrialized. It has moved from the village square to the corporate office and the digital algorithm. We are entering the era of mediocracy, where the system itself is designed to filter out the brilliant and promote the manageable. But why is the system so afraid of depth? Why is it that in the 21st century, the NPC has become the ultimate success story? While Schopenhauer diagnosed the intellectual gap from his study, Charles Bukowski lived it in the bars, the factories, and the back alleys of the world. Bukowski knew exactly why mediocrity is the ultimate currency. He called it the fool's paradise. He understood that for most people, the truth is not a goal, it's an intruder. In his view, the average person builds a life out of small, safe illusions, the 9-to-5 job, the mindless chatter, the pursuit of empty status. To maintain this paradise, everyone must agree to keep the conversation shallow. As Bukowski put it, the problem with the world is that the intelligent people are full of doubts, while the stupid ones are full of confidence. This is where Schopenhauer and Bukowski meet. Schopenhauer famously argued that a person of high intellect can only communicate with others by lowering themselves. He likened it to a giant trying to talk to a dwarf by kneeling in the mud. But Bukowski took it further. He saw that in the fool's paradise, if you don't kneel, if you don't pretend to be as shallow as the rest, they won't just ignore you, they will resent you. Why? Because your depth is a reminder of the abyss they are trying to ignore. Your intelligence is a hole in their paradise. When you speak with nuance, when you question the obvious, or when you refuse to participate in the mindless enthusiasm of the herd, you are popping their bubble. And there is nothing a fool hates more than someone who threatens their comfort. In this paradise, mediocrity is the entry fee. To belong, you must surrender your complexity. You must agree that the trivial is important and the profound is boring. Bukowski's genius was in recognizing that most people aren't looking for enlightenment, they are looking for anesthesia. They want to be numbed. The power of the ordinary is essentially the power of a collective anesthesia. It's a pact where everyone agrees to stay asleep. And if you're the one trying to wake them up, you're not a hero. You're the alarm clock everyone wants to smash against the wall. This is the communication barrier. You are speaking the language of the awake in a world that is desperately trying to stay in a dream. But what happens when this fool's paradise becomes the official structure of our society? What happens when the system itself decides that being a fool is the only way to get ahead? This is where we move from social behavior to the dangerous reality of mediocrity. We've seen the philosophical and personal cost of depth, but now we must look at the structural reality. We are living in the age of mediocrity. This isn't just a social trend, it is a system designed by the average for the average to ensure the survival of the average. In a true meritocracy, the best rise to the top, but in a mediocracy, excellence is seen as a risk. Think about how modern institutions function. Whether it's a corporate hierarchy, a political party, or even an educational system, these structures value predictability over brilliance. Why? Because a brilliant mind is unpredictable. It questions the status quo. It finds flaws in the foundation. It cannot be easily managed. The system has developed a sophisticated immune response to deha. If you are too efficient, you make your colleagues look bad. If you are too creative, you disrupt the established workflow. If you are too honest, you expose the fool's paradise we discussed earlier. The result? The system filters for the middle. It promotes the person who is competent enough to keep the machine running, but not so bright that they try to change the machine's direction. This is the triumph of the NPC, the individual who follows the script, hits the marks, and never asks why. In this environment, mediocrity isn't just accepted, it's a prerequisite for success. As the philosopher Alain Deneau pointed out, we are being told to hide our teeth and blend in. Excellence has become a social liability. Schopenhauer would argue that this is the will of the species in its most organized form. The species doesn't want heroes, it wants workers. It doesn't want poets, it wants consumers. By rewarding the mediocre, the system ensures its own immortality. It creates a world where the blind lead the blind, because a leader with sight might lead them somewhere they aren't ready to go. In a mediocracy, the most dangerous person is the one who can think for themselves, because that person cannot be bought with a title or silenced with a paycheck. They are the only ones who can see that the emperor has no clothes. But in a world where everyone is legally required to praise the emperor's new outfit, the one who speaks the truth is treated as the ultimate villain. So, if the system is rigged against depth, and if the crowd is armed with the shield of the ordinary, what choice is left for the outsider? Is the only path a life of silent suffering, or is there a way to turn this isolation into a weapon? So, we find ourselves at a crossroads. We live in a world that rewards the mask, not the face. A world that prefers the fool's paradise to the bitter truth. If you are someone who feels the weight of your own thoughts, if you've been sidelined for your depth or silenced for your honesty, you must realize one thing. The isolation you feel is not a defect. It is your sovereignty. Schopenhauer's ultimate advice was not to fight the crowd, but to transcend it. He believed that the only true freedom lies in voluntary solitude. If society is a theater of shadows, the only way to see the light is to leave the theater. You cannot win a game that is rigged to favor the average, so you must stop playing it on their terms. As Bukowski reminded us, some people never go crazy. What truly horrible lives they must lead. To be sane in a mediocre world is to be asleep. To be successful in a mediocracy is often a sign of compromise. The power of the ordinary is a temporary power. It lasts only as long as the crowd is together. But the power of the individual, the one who has embraced their own depth, is eternal. It is the power of the sovereign outsider. You are not lonely, you are just rare. You are not an outcast, you are a pioneer of a reality that others are too afraid to even imagine. Maybe the world belongs to the ordinary. Let them have it. Let them have the titles, the shallow applause, and the comfortable lies. But remember, they will never know the thrill of a truly original thought. They will never feel the electric spark of a soul that refuses to be dampened. The price of depth is high. It is paid in silence, in misunderstandings, and in long nights of questioning. But in that silence, you find something they will never possess: yourself. Unfiltered, unmasked, absolute. Don't trim your branches just because the ceiling is low. If you don't fit in, it's because you were meant to stand out. Keep looking into the abyss, and don't be surprised when the abyss starts to look back with respect.